Man, shit.
Hello. Hello, and welcome to my podcast. This is the second podcast in adaptive immunity. This one has to do with the lymph system. So in the cartoon, you can see the human with the lymph vessels running throughout the body. And there's lymph nodes and lymphatic ducts and specific lymph organs, but it's more important that we look at the lymph system on a cellular level. So if you look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you can see a blood capillary with the red blood cells in it. And then there's tissue cells living in the interstitial fluid, and then you can see the lymph vessels with the green arrows denoting collection of interstitial fluid into the lymph capillaries. And then those lymph capillaries will take the lymph back to lymph nodes where the B and T cells live, and then those B and T cells of specific immunity, aka adaptive immunity, can interrogate what leaked out of the capillaries from the blood into the interstitial fluid and then into the lymph. And so, for instance, if you cut your finger and a pathogen like a bacteria gets into your blood system, that bacteria could leak out into the interstitial fluid, get picked up by a lymph vessel, and then the lymph vessel would take the bacteria and lymph fluid to the lymph nodes where the lymph would slowly percolate through the node, and the B and T cells with their B cell receptors and T cell receptors would be able to look for the specific antigens on the bacterial invader. So the lymph system basically produces the cells of adaptive immunity and allows them to mature. Those are the B and T cell with their associated B cell receptors and T cell receptors. So you can see in the bottom right hand side of the screen in red, it tells you that the lymphatic system is a surveillance system that screens or interrogates fluid from all tissues of the body. Particularly, the lymph system is set up at the portals of entry, like the throat and the intestinal tract, the rectum and the anal canal. Anywhere a microbe could possibly enter into the mucosal tissue of your body, you've got the lymph system set up there. And then if you look at just above the red writing, you can see there's mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue, or MALT. Those include the Peyer's patches, so that's just the name of the person that discovered them. But Peyer's patches are mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, and in that MALT, then that's where you find B and T cells and macrophages that are just waiting to see if some foreign invader got in a portal of entry. So this is a lymph node specifically to show you that lymph fluid comes in through the afferent lymphatic vessel. So I don't know if you remember from 201, if you took 201, remember there's the afferent sensory neurons that bring sensory information to the brain, and then there's the efferent motor neurons that take motor commands out to the body. But in the lymph node, that there's an afferent lymph vessel, so that's bringing lymph fluid from the tissue into the lymph node. And you can see in the cartoon there's a lymphatic nodule with a germinal center. That's where the B cells and T cells live. So as the lymph fluid percolates through the lymph node, the B and T cells can get a look at the antigens that are on those pathogens. And then the lymph goes out the efferent lymphatic vessel, and then it'll drain into the subclavian vein, and then the lymph fluid will have reached the blood system. So you basically return that lymph fluid back into the blood. You have a lot of lymph nodes. Most notably, people probably think about the lymph node nodes in their groin and armpit. But the lymph nodes are there evolutionarily to allow for B cells and T cells with their B cell receptors and T cell receptors to interrogate that fluid to see if they find a matching antigen on a foreign invader. The lymph node is also where you'll have a clone of B cells that can replicate. So if, for instance, if the B cells and their B cell receptors, a single B cell with a single B cell receptor finds a foreign invader that fits into the B cell receptor, then that B cell will undergo clonal expansion. In other words, that B cell will replicate and you'll form an army of B cells that can recognize the specific antigen on the pathogen. Other lymphoid organs and tissues, you have the spleen and the tonsils, and then, like we talked about earlier, the mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. That includes your appendix and any lymphoid tissue in your respiratory tract, or your vagina, the bladder, the mammary glands, and in the wall of the intestine.